Hi guys. I had a request by a commenter on one of my blog posts asking me to make a video on how to talk to Jehovah's Witnesses, or specifically how Christians can talk to Jehovah's Witnesses in a way that they might listen. So that's what this post is going to be. First of all, I just want to tell you a little story about my past. When I was a Jehovah's Witness, I was going door to door one day with my mom, and we came to a house where a lady invited us in, so I was happy that I was going to be able to give my presentation to her, but she didn't want to hear it. All she wanted to do was tell me stories about prayers that had been answered, and as I looked around her house, I could see that she was a devout Christian. She had all sorts of Bibles and research materials, Christian research materials. Her stories were actually quite remarkable. And it was really, really hard for me to deny that what she was telling me was true. I mean, I had a couple choices. I could either question my indoctrination, which told me that people outside of the Jehovah's Witness organization don't have God's favor. Or I could maybe assume that the answers to her prayers that she was getting were maybe from demons or something, because the one thing I couldn't do was convince myself that she wasn't getting answers to her prayers, because it was that remarkable. So that had a big effect on me, and her stories lived rent-free in my mind for a long time. In fact, I never forgot them. It didn't change me at that time. I was unable to question my indoctrination at that time. But when I eventually did wake up, I thought about that. So that's something to keep in mind for people who don't really know how to talk to Jehovah's Witnesses. She didn't discuss doctrine with me at all. All she did was she told her testimony. So, in case you don't already know, if you haven't seen any of my other videos, the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses is not just another Christian denomination. It's considered by many to be a dangerous pseudo-Christian cult. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one, it's that the control that the leadership exerts over Jehovah's Witnesses is in some cases extreme and even dangerous. For example, they don't allow their members to have blood transfusions. And they shun ex-members in a way that is actually very, very dangerous for their mental health. The other reason is because, and this is exclusive to Christianity, this doesn't have anything to do with, the secular definition of the cult, but Jehovah's Witnesses teach what most Christians would consider unscriptural doctrines, and they're so far outside of what's normally considered Orthodox Christianity that it can't really be called Christian. I would say it would be considered by most Christians to be what Galatians 1:8 calls another gospel. Okay, so that's the reason. That's the reason why Jehovah's Witnesses are considered dangerous and not something that you want your friends to be a part of, basically. Okay, so first of all, before you consider talking to a Jehovah's Witness and trying to convince them that they're wrong, you need to understand that for them, waking up is dangerous. Depending on how long they've been associated, they stand to lose what to them might seem like literally everything. They could lose their parents, their siblings, their friends, pretty much everyone they know, if they're deeply entrenched in the religion. And they're taught that dissidents, which they call apostates, are spiritual poison and have to be completely shunned. So when I say lose, I mean really truly lose, because a lot of people will say things like, oh, well, I know that there are other groups that, they treat you bad if you try to leave. It's not the same. It really isn't. When I say lose, I mean they'll treat you like you are either dead or like you have never existed, which is actually, I think, worse. So once a Jehovah's Witness is either expelled from the organization, which is called disfellowshipping, or they disassociate themselves, like I said, they're treated as if they died, and that is, for most, unimaginably painful. It often leads to severe mental illness or even suicide. I actually know of a case. I didn't know him personally, but I know of a man who he woke up and his wife was not happy about it. He ended up losing his children because she didn't want him influencing their children to lose the organization. And he became so despondent that he did commit suicide. So I'm telling you all this so that you understand their reticence. You understand why. I mean, they have a huge reason not to want to be intellectually honest. So be kind. Second, they probably won't listen to you unless they're already questioning. If they're not ready to do that, then just pray for them, honestly. But if you think that they might be ready to hear you, try giving your testimony, like the woman that in my story. In Revelation 12:11, it says that our testimony is powerful. So, and the thing is, arguing doctrine really helps unless they're already, like I said, questioning. Most JWs are well trained to frustrate the average Christian with their labyrinthine eisegesis of the New World Translation. A diehard Jehovah's Witness will reject even the most biblically sound, well thought out argument. They're conditioned to believe that no one can understand the Bible except for the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. But here's the thing, it's much harder for them to reject or explain away your authentic encounters with God. So do tell your testimony. That is my favorite approach. Because if a Jehovah's Witness loses faith in the Watchtower organization before they've had a genuine encounter with God, they almost inevitably become an unbeliever. In fact, I believe it's been estimated by some that up to 90% of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses are unbelievers. So if you decide to take any approach other than just giving your testimony or talking about the Bible, do everything you can to help them to hang on to their faith. So for me, personally, what kicked my awakening into high gear was the COVID lockdowns. I started to see very clearly the emotional manipulation and spiritual abuse that was happening within the organization. And I think that's the case with a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, is they won't be able to question their indoctrination until they can clearly see that the organization is suspect. They will defend the interpretations of the organization to their dying breath, unless they at some point are able to see, like I always say, the humbug behind the curtain, like, reference to Wizard of Oz, that if they're at some point able to see the flawed, imperfect, and even possibly devious men behind that facade. So if you do try to show a Jehovah's Witness the truth about the organization, about some of the bad things that are happening within the organization, make sure you stick to the facts. There's a lot of unprovable conjecture on the internet about the Watchtower organization, but there are hard, verifiable facts that are available. Jehovah's Witnesses are extremely, and I mean extremely, suspicious of outside information about the organization. they'll almost inevitably dismiss any negative information as apostate lies, unless you can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that what you are presenting is true. Even then, they may either claim you're lying or that your source is biased and unreliable. And again, emphasize that just because the Watchtower organization is untrustworthy does not mean that God is. This has to be done so carefully. I always say, in my experience, trying to wake up a Jehovah's Witness is like defusing a bomb. You have to be so careful and so deliberate, and yeah. So another way that you can maybe help them is make them aware of their own history. I know of at least one person who all it took was reading Charles Taze Russell's original works, his books, and it opened her eyes. Russell, he was the founder of the Watchtower organization, and he thought of himself as a prophet. He's very fond of setting dates for the second coming of Christ, and every date he set was wrong. And for most Christians, they would, knowing that, they would consider him to be a false prophet. So for more on that, I would really recommend the website jwfacts.org. In fact, that's a great website for all things JW. Not only the history, but also current events and things like that. So if you want to get up to date and you want to know know what's going on, know why people object to Jehovah's Witnesses, that's a good place to go. So, lastly, can you imagine being immersed in a reality that is really a mirage? Can you imagine waking up to that fact? Can you imagine that being your reality from the time you're born into this world, and then waking up? The disorientation and the pain is real. The movie The Truman Show was a really, really good, I would call it sort of a parable about waking up from a lie, basically. A lived lie. And there's a quote from that film that I find especially apt for helping people to understand Jehovah's Witnesses, and that is, we accept the reality with which we're presented. That's true. But what happens when that reality starts to crumble? It can be both exhilarating and terrifying. So, my Christian brothers and sisters, I'm talking to you. Next time the Jehovah's Witnesses come knocking, maybe think twice about hiding in the back room and telling them to go away. They are precious to God, and they need what you have. They're trapped and silenced in a cruelly seductive and demanding system of psychological control, and it's really hard for them to escape. Many of them are genuinely seeking God, and what they've been taught by the organization really seems true to them. So, they deserve your love and compassion, not rejection or cruelty. Galatians 5:1 says, "It is for freedom that you were set free." Jehovah's Witnesses need the freedom that you have that you probably take for granted. The most loving thing you can do is learn how to talk to them effectively. And if your efforts are rejected, pray, pray, pray. Give them time. Give them grace. It could literally mean their lives. Thanks, guys.